Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. So, today is part two of our four-part webinar series. And so, this series is on taking back control of your life, adapt through grief. So, thank you so much for tuning in last week. And if you are new to this series and you've had a chance to view the recording, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. And I'm excited to introduce our facilitator again. Joelle, if we could have the next slide, please. Perfect. So to those of you, if in case you are new, Joelle McKiernan is a registered social worker with a Master's of Social Work degree from British Columbia. She is a certified counselor with the Canadian Counseling and Psychotherapist Association. She has worked as an adjunct professor at the University of Northern British Columbia and Coast Mountain College. She's also a program leader with Wellspring, and she also brings a patient perspective to this series as she was diagnosed with breast cancer in October 2020. So I just want to say a huge thank you again, Joelle, and thank you to everyone for being here today. We really appreciate all the comments in the forum. There was a lot of great engagement and sharing, and it really does help us to better understand the impact of the content that we are creating and how we can better support and share some coping strategies that are tailored to that. So first and foremost, thank you so much for those who did share in the forum. And Joelle, I will pass it over to you for week two today.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, welcome back. Yes. And for those that are new, my name is Joelle, and welcome to this somewhat difficult topic of grief and trying to understand our grief and take back a bit of control after we've had such a significant loss like the diagnosis of cancer or other losses that you have had that have kind of resurfaced. That's completely normal. So we're going to talk about all these different things. I live, as I told you last time, but for those that are new, I live in Northern British Columbia, and I want to acknowledge the unceded and ancestral home of the Tsimshian Nation that I live on, work on, and play on, and that I'm so grateful for. And as was said, this is the second talk. Oops, sorry, the second talk in the series of four. And as I said in the first talk, that I teach university courses on this, so and workshops and things like that. So this is a really kind of abbreviated talk because I could talk for hours on this. So, but I'm really glad that you returned and. Yeah, and I hope that you got a chance to see the first talk on Wellsprings the online because it is kind of a progressive talk in that some of the concepts we talked about in the first week we're going to continue to use and discuss in the throughout the sessions. And I'm just wondering if anyone was able to do the homework chart. um, Perhaps you found it challenging, perhaps it was helpful to learn about earlier or things that are kind of left unsaid and ungrieved. You can put your comments in the chat about the homework and how that impacted you, and we will talk about it. Um, if you didn't, I believe it's on the community forum as well, that chart. That chart I'm hoping that you'll use throughout the series to see, okay, this is what I learned how to grieve. This is what was shown to me. This is how I understand it to be. Okay. Yeah. So I'm just gonna recap a bit, just a few of the concepts because like I said, we're going to use them again. So just to talk briefly, very briefly about what we learned in the first session was that we discussed loss that it's often not just the primary loss that we're struggling with. For instance, for cancer diagnosis, the primary loss is of health or uh, bodily mobility or bodily changes that have happened in our normal healthy body life, like we notice the changes, things have happened. So those are kind of the primary losses, which means those are the ones that are more obvious to us, right? That of course we've lost our health, we are now a patient, whatever that means. And yeah, so but the other losses that accompany that are what we call the secondary losses, and those are depend really on the meaning that you um give to the loss, um yeah, and how we create that meaning is through a whole bunch of different ways. Um, And so I'm going to talk about those three different ways. So attachment style is how are we attached to that which we lost, right? Now, you can it sounds easier to do that when we're kind of talking about the loss of a person, of course, how we've attached to them. Have we seen them a lot? Are they in our lives a lot? Or are there anything that we need to deal with or whatever has been left unresolved? So that attachment can impact our loss even with the cancer, right? Is I feel like I should be a healthy person. I do what I'm supposed to do and all these kinds of things. And then that is taken from us with the diagnosis of cancer in our own mind. That meaning can be associated with it. Right. So it really matters. The meaning can determine the nature and the intensity of the loss, how difficult it is to overcome and to deal with those feelings that come up. And then the other thing that, of course, defines the loss is our perceptual lens, how we see the world, right? How we see that which we lost in terms of our family rules around loss, our emotional expression, were we allowed to through our culture, our belief systems, our past experiences. All of these kind of give us a filter with which we see the world through and the loss through as well, right? And this then creates meaning. For example, how do we view the diagnosis and the prognosis and the treatment? Have we had people in our lives that have had cancer? What were their experiences? How did we see that? Right? How do we view the medical system? And now that we have to rely on it or at least work with that medical system, how have we dealt with that in the past? What do we know about it? What are we how familiar are we with the terminology and all of those kinds of things, right? And then the last way that we kind of look for or how we're going to process through the grief is actually called what I use the word is adaptation. So adaptation is the grieving process, kind of the road to how we adapt to this new set of circumstances that we find ourselves in because of the loss. And we will use the acronym ADAPT in the next three talks to uncover what we need to know about the grief and how to manage it better. What are our blocks? How to take back control? And in this way, I'm hoping that we can kind of feel like instead of the grief grieving us, that we're grieving the grief, that we understand what's going on and we can be more a part of that process. So, as I said, this is the acronym that we're going to tackle today. And the first two are throughout the 3 weeks. And the first two that we're going to tackle today. And these are really big topics. So, acknowledging the reality of the loss is our first one, and then dealing with emotions and thoughts. Now, of course, dealing with emotions and thoughts could be a whole course in and of itself. And so, we're going to just touch on it, and then, yeah, we can talk more about it throughout the series as well. So let's go to initial diagnosis of cancer. And what can happen is this shock and denial. And denial's really gotten a bad rap in the past because um, you know, people think, oh, you should accept it right away. Well, actually, the National Institute of Mental Health says denial is a natural process, a natural response by our brain to slow the pain and distress from the information. So it is a natural process. It is a natural response to what's happening to us, to the suddenness, the sudden change, and what that means in our lives. And about 70% of people experience denial to some extent. So you're not alone in that if that's what you're struggling with. So some of the things, behaviors and things that you'll notice if you are in shock and denial, things um, that you'll understand or feel that, oh, this is what I'm experienced, so this is what I'm going through. So the initial shock and emotional numbness, this is very normal, right? So just trying to take in the information, it can be really confusing, disoriented, especially if it was unexpected. I know when I was diagnosed initially with the breast cancer, the doctor came in and said, well, what do you think the results are? The doctor didn't even want to say the word. And I said, do I have breast cancer? And the doctor, she said, yes. And so I was kind of maybe expecting it on some level. So, but if you're not expecting it at all and you hear that word, it's really confusing and disorienting. Shutting down and being unable to process emotions. You're just not able to at the time. Your brain, it's almost it is actually a defense mechanism that we have, that the brain, that allows us to take in as much information as we can deal with, because we still need to live our lives, right? So one of the things that can be shut down is that on those processing of emotions. It doesn't mean it's shut down for good, but just for the initial phase while you get, the information is integrated. And oh, right, I've been diagnosed, right? So forgetting and avoiding reminders can happen, missed appointments, lab work, sometimes that can happen, or you can be super focused on that and everything else you forget. So yeah, um you can even wake up in the morning, I know I did, and just disbelief with what happened, and even forgetting that I was diagnosed at first. You can sleep more than usual or not able to sleep. It depends on what your coping mechanism is. Some people cope by sleeping. Um, Procrastination and dealing with the next steps. So this is where we come into some problems with denial, because oftentimes, we need to talk about treatment options and things of that nature, and that can be hinder the healing process and decisions for treatment if we are in prolonged denial, right? Denial at first is normal, but this prolonged denial can be harmful to us. And so the next slide, we're going to talk about what we can do about that. We're easily distracted. We stay busy to try and avoid. Again, these are ways that we cope in order to manage the news. Is sometimes people keep busy in order to avoid stress or dealing with what's going on. We engage in mindful behaviors with TVs or screens, or just doing things that are kind of on automatic pilot instead of really having to think about too much. Many of us focus on the needs of others instead of our own. This is our roles as caregivers. We like to, focus on other people's needs as opposed to our own. That can be another way to cope. We tend to say things like, oh, I'm fine and everything's fine and all those kinds of things. And we also can use distractions. Like I said, you can busy yourself doing things, but other distractions is substances. We can use alcohol, drugs to avoid facing reality. Other kinds of ways of distraction is overeating, gambling, shopping. I mean, it just depends on what works for you, right? These are all ways to kind of avoid facing the reality of what's going on and dealing with the feelings that are coming up. So, what do we do with this denial and this shock? Because, like I said, we don't want it to go on for a long time, because it can hinder our healing process. So, we need to have time to allow for the absorbing of the news. We need to repeat it to ourselves, even out loud, even privately. Say, "This is what's happened," and say it out loud. I know that was really tough for me. I could say, "Oh, I've been diagnosed with cancer," but I couldn't say I have cancer. I just couldn't say it for a long, long time. Talk with a trusted person that you have about it. Express your feelings with them about this denial. Like, I just can't believe this has happened. I feel like I've done everything right, or whatever comes up. Take time for yourself. Express yourself on paper. I just wanted to read quickly. I know we don't have lots of time, but I wanted to read quickly what I wrote. About when I was diagnosed, not with the breast cancer, but with the next issue that I had. I did a journal entry, and I'd like to share that with you. So let me take a breath here. Quote, "There is no cure," unquote. The room got quiet. My ears stopped working. I remember thinking, wait, I had the surgery. I got the lump out of the breast, and there was no movement to the nose. The surgeon said he'd got it all. I even did radiation to be sure. Then he said, quote, "Mets to the bone." Oh. I could feel my best friend's hand squeeze my hand. Oh, yeah, she's here. And my mom has her best friend listening on the phone. I was only hearing muffled sounds as the doctor spoke. Something about 3 to 5 years. What? I suddenly had an expiry date. I couldn't hear my friend. I could hear my friend asking questions, also wanting to know what that meant. A warm rush of adrenaline flooded my body. It felt like fear that was choking me. My life was being threatened. I didn't remember much else. I wasn't catatonic. I carried on conversations with people around me, but nothing was sinking in. I was glad to have my friend Lisa there, and my mom had her friend Agnes. That might that night when I got home, I snuck outside onto the patio in the pitch dark under the night sky and wept. To me, at the time, it felt like I was being punished, that somehow I deserved it, and it finally caught up to me. And thus began the journey from victimhood to resiliency, from no cure to healing my life, the life I had remaining, from great fear to absolute love and gratitude of life. Now you can tell by the end of that I didn't write it right away. It took time to see this as a journey, right? So I maybe wrote that maybe I would say 6 months after the actual diagnosis. So at first it may be difficult to write and you don't make any sense, and that's okay. But what I was showing you there is the processing of the feelings, right? When you're ready to write or when you're ready to, express those to allow yourself to do that. And try not to be surprised if you forget about the diagnosis and continue on with life for a little while. Don't be surprised about the denial. It's part of it. We just really want to acknowledge that it's happening so that we can move through it. Who is your support system? What is your current stressors in life? How are you going to manage your day-to-day life and go on? So thinking about those kinds of things as well as integrating. So that's kind of the denial piece. Now we're going to go on to feelings. And this is such a big topic, as I said. So I'm hoping that you're going to take away something from this. So emotions and feelings, to a lot of people just use these words interchangeably. To me, they mean something very different. Now, as some of you know, or you all know because she reread my bio. I'm a therapist, but I'm also a patient. And so these have helped me, these definitions or distinguishing the two have really helped me in able to process the grieving. So emotions, you notice I separated the E from the word motions. And so E in capital E in physics is energy. And that's what it feels like to me is energy. And you can also look it up in research and or people that talk about grief is emotions are what we feel in the body, right? The tension, the adrenaline flush that I felt, the heat, the nervousness, the anxiety, all of those things are energy moving in the body. Okay, so they are energy moving in the body. What feelings are is what we label those sensations. So we feel those sensations and we label them. Oh, that's sadness. Oh, I'm really angry or I'm disappointed or whatever, right? So the emotion is the body sensation and then the feeling is what our mind labels that sensation. It's not the same to me. Because I like the difference because then I can stay with the emotion and not tend to go on with the story. And we're going to talk more about that. The story is what can really prolong that grieving process and really be labored and quite can be problematic. Can help too. So we'll get into that. There's no bad emotions, there's just stuck ones. So again, through our family rules, we may have been defined as some feelings are bad. They're not bad so much as maybe challenging to talk about, like shame, guilt, regret. These are really can be challenging emotions to talk about, but they're not bad. Again, they're energy moving in our body and then our mind assessing what that means to us. But stuck emotions are an issue. And the reason is because we don't want to keep that energy in our body. It's not meant to be kept there. Emotions are meant to be expressed. That's what they're there for, is to give an alarm to say, hey, something's going on, and for our mind to pick up on it and say, okay, this is what's happening. So we want to connect to the body where those emotions live. And it's a struggle for many people because many people live from about the neck down. They don't live in their bodies for many reasons. We kind of go ahead and we're too much in our thoughts and our brain, and we don't connect enough with our body. And I found, being diagnosed with cancer, I really didn't have a choice anymore. I had to connect with my body. I had to listen to my body. I had to, when it needed to rest, I needed to allow it to rest. I couldn't just, you know, um, discount it at all. So that's what I found. And then the other thing about emotions is that you want to try and create the language of the feelings. The story or the meaning of the feeling can help us understand. So for instance, if we have a family rule that doesn't allow us to express feelings for certain areas, then we understand, oh, I'm struggling with expressing anger or expressing sadness, and this is why. So it gives us that understanding, but then it can cause problems because we stay stuck there, right? We have to make a different choice maybe and say, you know what? As a child, I wasn't allowed to do that, but now I am. Or when I was being bullied on the school, it wasn't okay for me to cry, but I can go into my room and cry now. It's okay. And I know that sounds silly, but that's kind of how we work. Our brain works on the past, right? What happened in the past and what worked in the past. And that changes over time, right? So, how do we move these emotions? Well, talking and expressing them, no matter what they are. Now, some of the feelings we don't want to express because they're, really challenging and we don't want people to judge us. So, we can put those in on a piece of paper. I call it a bitch book. And you just write down all the things that you couldn't say to people, but you want to express them. Like, this isn't fair. I took care of my body and other people aren't taking care of their body and they're fine. This is all of those feelings are okay. We want to just express them on the paper and then we rip them up or get rid of them in some way. It's not meant to be read and understood. The bitch book is simply to get it out, rip it up, glue the pages together, burn it, whatever way that you want to. Okay, so yeah, so expressing your feelings no matter what, staying active, moving that body, that energy, eating more balanced meals, taking yourself, treating yourself to things that you enjoy. Do you like to have a hot bath? Do you like to have naps? Do you like to go out and play certain things? If you're able to, do them. Do your favorite things. Create the day of, what's the best day? What's the best way to spend your time in the day? If you have time, do it. Do it. Go to the movies, out for dinner, whatever you can. These are all ways of expressing that you're still alive, that that this cancer diagnosis hasn't taken away your life or your ability to experience your life in this moment, right? It hasn't. Um, get help with everyday activities, because one of the things that happens through treatment, and through grieving is we have a lack of energy. That is normal. Our energy goes down. Our energy in our body is dealing with other things, trying to process this, understand it, maybe dealing with some of the side effects from the treatments. So, get as much help as you can. And I know someone put in the forum the difficulty of asking for help. I'm there with you. It was such a challenge, but I also know how much it meant to the people around me to be able to help because they felt so helpless with what was going on for me. But I know how challenging it is to ask for help. Using a journal to connect with yourself. Don't force yourself to be happy. You could, you don't have to try and force yourself to be happy. That's that positive talk that we talked about before. You don't have to force it. Or any emotion you don't have to force. I should be worried about this more, or I should be no, just be in the moment. That's the mindfulness that we're going to chat about, probably in the last session. Mindfulness and being connected to yourself in the moment. Right now I am okay. Right now I'm doing my housework. Right now I'm doing this, right? Um and also remember, because of that lack of energy, you're not going to be able to do as much as you can in one day, and that does not mean that you're a failure, or that you're, I don't know, judging yourself. That's It's just not helpful to do that, because you don't have the same amount of energy. And it's not because you're doing anything wrong, it's because of what's going on in your life. And try not to give up any good healthy habits. We want to keep those healthy habits if we can. So now we're going to talk about thoughts because we're running out of time here. And we are going to talk about it more and more. So don't panic that we didn't have enough time to talk about thoughts, but thoughts create our reality again through what we focus on in the world, right? It creates our reality, and it's based on our past, our socialization, our family rules, our cultures, and we can get into these ways and patterns of thinking that we call stinking thinking, which we're going to talk about next slide. Okay, so stinking thinking, just I'll put that on hold, but we can get into these patterns of thinking that really are harmful for us. It's normal, people do it all the time, but if you have certain ways of thinking and you get into a pattern and you do that all the time, it can be troublesome. So the other thing that I want you to do, and this is a bit of your homework if you're willing to do it, is just start to listen to what is going on in your thoughts. This is called stream of consciousness writing. And you only have to do it for about 3 or 4 minutes a couple of times a day, where you sit down and you don't judge yourself. You just write whatever you're thinking. Don't worry about punctuation or spelling. That none of that counts. You might even just have words. You might just you don't even have to have complete sentences. Just start to see what are you saying to yourself? Because that's going to impact how you feel, and it's going to impact our body, right? Because and we're going to talk about this later, the way it impacts our body is it can start that fight or flight, right? That panicky feeling if we're thinking a lot of negative thoughts, right? And we're in that spiral. So 3 minutes twice a day, just to try it out, see what else. And I'm also going to put some journal prompts on the community forum so that you can start to journal. And of course, if it doesn't feel right, please don't do it. This is just suggestions. You might find your own prompts online. There's hundreds of thousands of them that you could do. So whatever works for you, but just starting to connect with ourselves, if we aren't already, in different ways to see what's going on for ourselves. So that the idea is the more and more aware we become, the more and more we have the choices, right? That no, I'm not going to operate from my family history or whatever happened there, like those rules. I'm going to allow myself to feel. I'm going to do it in a private way or whatever works for me. But yeah, I'm going to do those shifts and changes. So let's look at the stinking thinking. So I just picked four. There's several, but there's about 10, I think. But anyways, I picked four because these are the ones I think that we can really start to work on, right? And so the first one is the mental filter. This is where we can see the world and we only pick out the negative things. So we ignore anything positive that's happened. If one bad thing happened, that's what we focus on. We notice everything that is wrong in our life, and you know there's no judgment. Again, I'm not, hopefully you don't feel shame of that. It's just to recognize and say, wait a minute, I don't have to do this, right? I don't have to just focus on what's wrong, right? What it does again is strength. It heightens the stress and anxiety and depression. It's that self-defeating, believing that you're not good enough. That could be a belief issue that we need to look at. And we down and what it does is it downplays our personal achievements. So how to remedy that? So that means when you notice it, that you're doing that you're just focusing on the negative, try and find gratitude. What am I grateful for? Well, I'm grateful that I can still walk, or I can still do this, or I can phone my grandchildren, or I could, whatever that is, right? So really focusing on, that's the shift. That's the remedy for stinking thinking when we're talking about negative biases, is this practicing gratitude. Second one is catastrophizing. This is where we look at a situation and we blow it out of proportion. We look at it as, I'll give you an example. The doctor phoned and wants us to call him back. Oh no, what's wrong? We automatically think that a call could be the worst possible scenario, and we magnify it. Right? We think about what's the worst thing when we phone the doctor and have to leave a message and can't get back to him, right? And again, it exacerbates our stress and our anxiety. And what you want to watch out, our words are always, never, like, I never get in touch with him. I'm always missing his call. Those kinds of words exaggerate a situation. So becoming self-aware of what you're saying to yourself, those thoughts, those I must is another one, never, always, must. Um, those kinds of words are really, again, to look at yourself and see, or to hear them and say, oh, wait a minute, I'm catastrophizing. I'm going to worry before I even know what's happening, becoming self aware of that. All or nothing thinking, which is also what we can call black and white thinking. It's another term for it. This is where we think on this extreme. So either it's good or it's bad, it's right or it's wrong, it's black or it's white. And the problem with that in repetitive patterns is life is really about the gray. I mean, rarely do we absolutely know something or absolutely don't know something, right? I mean, and things are constantly changing as well. So there is no real uh, you know, um yeah, it's really, really challenging if you think that way. Often people who have had a lot of trauma, they in the past, in their childhood or whatever, often think this way because they want to be in control. I want to know if it's right or if it's wrong. And the problem with life is that there's lots of gray. And so yeah, so it can affect how we are motivated. Because it could be this black and white thinking can be quite exaggerated but also unrealistic, right? It's not often yes or no. It's, well, yes now, but it could change, right? And this can again contribute to really excessive high standards. If I can't do this perfectly, I won't do it at all. That kind of um, understanding. And we often have a poor uh, perception. I could never do anything right. Those kinds of things, right? That all or nothing thinking, like I'm either good or I'm bad. When in fact, I have, you know, emotions that I can express, but there are ones that I struggle with. That doesn't mean it's a bad emotion. And also, it can promote this feeling of helpless, right? That there's nothing you can do to change the situation. That's a big one. So we want to, instead of that, we want to start to consider the grays, right? When we start to hear ourselves doing that, and this one's a challenge because it's so ingrained, it's so much of a pattern, right? Um, and you can look online for these and exercises that you can do. I wish we could do them here. We just don't have the time. But yeah, look up the stinking thinking and if you're really stuck in ruminating and negative thoughts, look at the black and white thinking so you can catch yourself, because as soon as you catch yourself and you can say, okay, what's gray here or what's in the middle? What am I missing out on? How can I look at this in a different way? Right? And then the last one, which is a big one, it again deals with a word that we often say to ourselves, and that is our shoulding. We should ourselves, right? And the problem with shoulding is that it is a pattern of judgment. So what that means is that we are judging ourselves as we are saying it. We should do this. We should do that. We should have done this, whatever. And what they are we're making demands on ourselves or others that may not be realistic. Maybe we should do it, but we can't right now. So shoulding ourselves is not helpful, right? So shoulding, if you hear that word should, um, yeah, it can be an unrealistic should. It can be comparing yourself with other people. It can contribute to feelings of guilt, shame, anxiety, regret is another one, a big one. And it's based on expectations that can lead to feelings of being inadequate and disappointed with yourself. So all of the remedy for those kinds of things is more self-compassion. There's a reason you're doing what you're doing. You may not see it, you may not know in the past where that comes from, but being kind and gentle with ourselves is the way to move forward. Not beating, if you beat up on yourself, you will just continue that pattern of shoulds and beating yourself up, and that doesn't promote um, healing and health. You are going to be with you for the rest of your life. You are going to deal with this. You. That's how what I had to learn. Me. So I mean, I was a big person, or big beater upper. Even with all of my background and everything, I beat myself up a lot. And what helped me get to that healing road was kindness. kindness with myself, understanding, trying to understand why I'm doing the things I am, dealing with that negative talk in my mind that kept beating me up and saying, "Oh, you're not good enough." All of those things helped me towards my healing journey. And I so hope that it'll do the same for you.